Hello, everybody. Welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yi.
And I'm Wendy Yi.
And today we're talking about the Dice Tower Cruise.
No, we were talking about Galactic Cruise.
I was close. So this is Galactic Cruise, a game that looks a lot like it's going to be one of those Eagle Griffin, Vitalis sort of Ian O'Toole type games.
I think because it's Ian O'Toole, like all over it.
All over it, across the board, the box cover, and everything. Gorgeous, right? This is going to be well produced. It's a deluxe type of game, and it is also a very involved type of heavy Euro game, much like those, and very thematic as well.
It is, and so I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview, and it's going to be as short and sweet as I can make it based on the size of this box. It's not crazy short and sweet. For this Galactic Cruise overview, there's a lot going on, so I'm going to try to keep it pretty high level. Underneath my board here, there is the reputation track. It's a little bit hidden, as well as the victory point track, but I needed everything to fit in the screen. So let's talk about the round structure first. We have 3 main rounds to the game, and so what's going to happen is these cubes in the first round are going to fill this up. Once the cubes are full, then we'll trigger A scoring. Then we'll move on to B, or the second round, fill that up, and then we'll move on to B scoring. And then the third round, we'll fill it up. We'll move on to C scoring, which includes the end of game scoring. So how do you add cubes to these spots? Well, the first main way to do that is to launch ships. And the second way is to meet these objectives. I think the next part to talk about would be the actual player actions, and that is to either take a worker placement action or to launch a ship. So let's talk about worker placement first. This is just to place a worker into one of these 6 areas over here. If you choose to place it where someone else is, that will bump back into their ready area, and they can use that worker later. When you place a worker, you get to choose 2 actions that you take. There are 2 actions on the actual space listed. You can choose to take each one once or to take one of them twice. Also, if you are connected by a gear of your color, you can freely take any of the adjacent actions to that area as well. If you happen to be adjacent to another player's gear, you have to pay an additional cost, but you can use that gear as well. So this guy over here with an additional cost could do these 2 actions. For free, he could do these 2 or these 2. Also, as a side note, you can choose to mix up the actions. They don't have to be the ones together. So I could take this build a gear over here and this build an advanced worker if I wanted to. Now, all these worker placement actions are in service to preparing your ships for launch and then launching them. So let's talk about what is required to actually send off a cruise. For one, you need an engine, so this needs something to propel you forward. You also need a cockpit. These engines over here are going to be ways to unlock these income spaces, and income in games is also always awesome. So just know that that's a cool benefit there. And then the cockpits are going to be a scoring. So every time that you fly this rocket ship, you'll get some sort of scoring multiplier. This happens to say that each one of these little room areas in your ship, you're going to score 1 point for all the little rooms in your ships. Throughout the game, you can gain extra cockpits and engines, and these will give you immediate bonuses for the engines, and then once again these are going to be your multipliers at the end of the game as well as whenever you run this ship. I briefly mentioned the rooms. So these rooms, you're going to actually, when you buy them, they come over here and you basically you've bought blueprints for them, and then you're going to need to spend money to be able to put them in your ship. And the 2 most important parts of these are the points and then also who ideally wants to go in that part of the ship. So this is the Hollow Dome, and so this is really great for families and then people who want to relax. Now, starting off at the beginning of the game, we're allowed to have up to 3 ships, each 3 rooms high. So I could choose to add more to this if I wanted to, and if I had the money that it takes to build up these. And so let's say that I went ahead and I built this big, beautiful, wonderful ship here. So now that I have my ship built, I have to actually plan an itinerary, and I have to get people to come onto my ship. Now I look at this ship and I say, hey, there's a lot of purples. So I'm going to go ahead and spend some marketing, and I'm going to put these purple guys over here at this marketing cost. I'm also at some point going to come down with my travel agent, and I'm going to actually pick up this cruise, because this is a cruise that I want to have happen. Now it is time to actually launch our ship. We're going to go ahead and take our cruise director over here. This is our active worker, and he's going to come on this ship. But first he has to do the countdown and the checkoff to be able to launch. So first off, we are going to take over this cruise here. We're going to place it on our planner. We're going to put this guy back because he is not working anymore there. Then we would bring our people over and they can come join our ship. If we want to mark it to some more people, I'm going to go ahead and mark it to this blue guy over here. And then finally, we're going to place a cube up here to say we launched a ship. Remember, those cubes help trigger as well as score through each round. Then we pay whatever resources we need based on how big our cabins are. We go ahead and we score our cockpit, which I have that kind of high, but you score the cockpit, so I'd be getting 3 points right now for my cockpit. Then we'll also take one of these tiles over here and we'll place it on our ship. And this is going to be an additional point for later on, and it'll upgrade our income section there. Then this guy will stand over here saying he's ready to go, and that cruise is launched off. Then on future turns, I'm actually going to start the cruise at the beginning of a turn. So we'll have a space day, which means these people will score based on the rooms that they're in. And if they happen to match their color, which they do, they'll get points for that. And then you'll take your regular turn. Now on this turn, you can see I have no workers left, so I'm going to have to do a retrieval action. So instead of placing out a worker, I will retrieve a worker, and the little hand symbol means I will gain income. So I can choose one of these spots to gain income from, and since these are now upgraded, sweet, I can gain more from them. Then in the following turn, this guy will go to planet side, and we will choose whether we want to market for people to come out. Now, people that match the planet cost 1 less marketing than the people that do not match the planet. So I could spend 1 marketing, 2 marketing, and then 3, 4 marketing to get all these people out onto this planet. And then I would do a multiplier based on the tiles that are out. Now, conveniently, since I stopped that planet, I can drop this one off as well to gain a new power as well as a new multiplier. So now I'm up to 5 points per person that came out. So this would be a 15-point stop for me. Then these people will come back onto the ship because they had a blast there. They got lots of points for me. And then I would take my turn as normal. So I'd place out a worker and I would do the actions. Then the following turn after that, this cruise now finishes. This guy's going to come back here. I'm going to gain income. These fine fellow fiends are going to disappear and we'll do some cleanup stuff. But then I take a normal action once again, and this guy is available for that normal action. Like I said before, everything that you're doing on this board is trying to get your cruises going and getting your people on cruises. So there are a few things I didn't really mention or point out on the board, and that's okay. There's some cards, there's some cool abilities up there that you can get. But the bulk of it all is really spend your workers, do your actions, use the cool gears to get actions from different places so that you can get your cruise off, so that you can get cubes onto these little spots and score lots of points. Because at the end of all this, the person with the most points gets to own this company. Anyways, let's get back to the studio and talk about how we feel about this game. All right, in that overview, I had a couple little misspeaks, so hopefully I caught everything. But just to re-emphasize, this was just an overview. It's not for a complete playthrough. I didn't go into every single action detail, but I think you get that idea of we're trying to set up ourselves to make these cruises and launch off these cruises.
Yeah, it's very fine that not every rule is explained because there's no way to encapsulate all that. And even in this, we're gonna try to make this a shorter review as fits the game.
I feel like I could talk about this for an hour.
There's a lot to unpack here. Let's talk about literally unpacking this game. Plan words, baby.
Hey.
Okay. From the get-go, you see this box. It's huge. You open it up. The first thing that you see when you unbox it is this cute welcome package.
Right.
Right. It explains, hey, welcome to the Galactic Cruise Corporation, yada, 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 right?
I genuinely I started reading that because I didn't know much about the producers. I mean, it's their first time game, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, did they really sell like 5 years worth of their income stock, whatever, to like produce this game? And then I realized that was to start the cruise company. It was all pretend.
That was the in-game, no. So the most important thing of that is cute, right? I like onboarding guides and stuff, but they give you a packing guide. They explain to you, hey, this is what the experience of unboxing this gigantic box is going to be like, how to pack it away, the order that all the trays and stuff go in. I just want to give huge kudos to that because if your first experience with a game is nothing but frustration, then it's going to be harder to have a great time with that. The fact that it says, hey, if you want to just punch it out and play it right now, this is what you do. If you want to punch it and then pack it away, this is what you do. fantastic. Thanks
Super
for showing me where
useful.
everything goes.
Great pictures. Yeah, all that for sure. We do have the deluxe edition, and I don't know, do you know specifically the difference between the deluxe and the non?
Some cardboard tokens are upgraded. And
yeah, so there's some metal tokens.
Playmat.
The playmat for me is huge. So there is a pre-printed side of the board where the actions are just pre-printed. You can play on that. That's wonderful. But the other side of the board, you have the option of mixing up the action spaces, which I think is really fabulous if you're going to play this many times. But if you have the playmat, they actually slot into the playmat so they don't get bumped around. So you don't have like 3 layers of stuff moving.
Right. If you don't have it, you're still playing with a very good game. And in fact, the way that the action spaces are on a cardboard board, they shouldn't bump around too much or anything like that because you're putting your worker to the side of it. So we're not going to review all the deluxe components and stuff. They are nice. Everything out of this box is already very nice. And there's a lot of thoughtfulness put into the production, tools, artwork, and graphic design, making it so that all of the actions are understandable. A lot of the information is there and available in a way that they're very functional and good reminders. Because
this game is a 4-hour game. It just straight up is. It's like a 3, 4, 5-hour game if you're slow. Like it is a big game. There's a lot going on. One thing that I think really helps this game is that the theme is so thoroughly integrated into all the mechanisms. It's integrated into what you need to set off a cruise. It all makes sense. And so I feel like a lot of these big games, especially these like Lacerda weight, Lacerda level games, which this very much fits in that weight. A lot of them, like I know Vital Lacerda really tries to hold in that theme. And so I see that. I just feel like this is, if you told me this was by him, I would believe it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I definitely would. Because that theme is so tied into everything that you're doing. Do you need to have food and oxygen and water and fuel and whatever on your ship? Yes. Make sure you have that. Do you need to have people come and actually plan to come on your cruise? Yes. Market to them. Get them there. Do you need to plan the actual like places where you're going? Yes. Do you need to build the cruise ship? Yes. Like all of it makes sense.
And the other thing about it to me is that all of the actions are fun. There are very simple actions like get resources. But there's like a few different ways you can get resources. Cool. But as you gain those resources, you see the supply of it at the company kind of diminishing, right? To make a slight comparison, if you're familiar with Kanban or Kanban EV, you're all working for the same cruise company and you're vying as different director level people to become the next CEO, probably, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you are utilizing the resources, the available pool of them are diminishing. But since we're all at the same company, someone else can come along and say, well, I'm going to spend an action to trash one of my special action cards to refill the resources, make it available for everybody, and I get big bonuses for that. So it has a nicely interactive system to it where there's both the blatant interaction of taking spots, bumping workers out and all that stuff, but there's also those nice positives where if I bump your worker out of a worker placement spot, you get it back, which is nice, and you get a bonus for it. And also I refilled the resources that you were thinking about grabbing, but I made money from being the person to kind of refill it in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that there is a lot of positive interaction in this game, which I know is something that you and I tend to really enjoy. But it is heavily interactive through that positive interaction. So you have the resources, you have the card market, you have the employees that you're vying for, and then someone else can or not the employees, I'm sorry, the guests that you're vying for, right? Mm-hmm. And someone else can even move the guests and actually get them to go on specific cruises, like the itinerary-wise, and then you're choosing the itineraries. And so you're competing over these things, but you do have that positive nature.
Yeah, and there's ways that you can make some of this interaction more negative, or you can say, well, I bet that you want to go to that worker placement spot, so I'll go there ahead of you. I'll force you to bump me out. That's not super mean. You can, in theory, if you're playing this at a really high level, mm-hmm. If you need to, if you find it productive, you can, because you're working for the same company, be like, oh, I marketed your cruise that you have in the pipeline, and I put these customers in it. The ones that you probably don't want. But I'm also giving you a free action at that point. Mm-hmm. But I'm sticking you with the colors of customers that aren't going to pay out as big for you. Yeah. So you can play with a little bit more of that cutthroat, or you can play this kind of more relaxed, I guess is the way that I kind of look at the level of interaction in this one.
Yeah, I think that you give up a lot if you're going to be very cutthroat. And so it's not necessarily encouraged, but it is a possibility. Now, what really sets this game apart, because there's tons of heavy Euro games, right? There's tons of thematic games. For one, the theme is unique at the moment, but who knows what's going to happen? We could have 80 cruise-themed games. So, but I think what really sets it apart for me is the gears and how they work with the action selection. So as you're taking those worker placement spots, if you have gears around those worker placement spots, being able to expand them out, as I talked about in the overview, you just increase your selection and ability. And so those gears not only come off your board, which makes it so you can hold more resources and provide points if you get, finished columns of gears, but then they also build this engine of, I can go anywhere. I can take whatever 2 actions I want. And I love that you get to take 2 actions on a turn, just like in Terraforming Mars. I know we keep referencing other games, but it has that. It lets you feel like you're really setting up for a big turn instead of being like, I do one little thing, wait my turn, I do one little thing. So even though the actions are not complicated, they're not complex at all, and I don't feel like they take an eternity per turn, being able to do 2 at once feels like you're really setting up for those moments of like, I come here and I do the last 2 things I need to do so that I can launch next turn.
I think one thing I also appreciate, what you make me think when you say that, is that as the game progresses, your turns in this game can become a little more fulfilling without over-bogging the game down. There are many games in this in this kind of range of game, where by the end of the game, you're taking like these 8-minute long turns and everyone else is super checked out. The turns they don't ever feel like a waste in this game, especially as you start launching those cruise ships, which is such a joy, by the way, because you get that little free like mini action at the start of each turn. Once you have a cruise director out there moving along the different steps and getting the benefit. Oh, it's a space day or it's a port day or whatever. You have a fun little mini game of decisions, and that's pretty quick. And once you're done with that, then you move a worker or you recall your workers, basically, and then you just do the cleanup stuff at the end of your turn. So that structure, there's 3 things you do on a turn, stays the same. It doesn't get overbogged down, and it doesn't ever become this thing where I find it slogging as you're playing. Even with more players, even near the end of the game, there's going to be more thoughtfulness. It would be a little thinkier, but it's not that your turns become bloated.
I think part of that is that the workers that you are using to take the actions are also the workers that are then hosting these cruises. And so as you spend them, you actually have less workers. And I know you're only using 1 worker per round, but even if you magically can get 3 cruises going off at once, you're like, okay, I did all of that procedural bonusy stuff, but then there's not a lot I can do because I only have this 1 worker. So it's often like a recall turn or a play. You know what I mean? You're kind of going back between that recall and placement more often. Yeah. If you've got a whole bunch of cruises and you're getting all those bonuses.
I think that to me is also the question of like, what does this game do different? There's plenty of heavy Euro games, blah, 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 right? There's a lot of worker placement games. There's a lot of worker placement games where you bump out someone else's person and they get a bonus. But the fact that your own worker pool, as you upgrade workers, that feels great. They have variable bonuses each game. It's like it would be like having the grande worker or a special worker in other worker placement games, but all of a sudden you can change out what their bonus is each game. Love that. Circling back, what makes this game really unique, though, is the fact that your worker pool fluctuates because you're sending them on the cruises, too. They're the directors. Yeah. And so, you level up and you get one of those bonus workers. You're like, yes, this feels so good. I have 2 cruises operating at the same time. Over half of my workforce is tied up in these bonuses. So, yes, you can have 2 cruises operating at the same time. Do you want that? Is that going to actually bite you too much, right?
Yeah. Do you want to time them so that one is about to finish as the other one is beginning?
Right. There's a lot of thoughts I could say about this. Rule book, the player aids, all phenomenal. All of these things that are done extremely well. We haven't really made mention of many complaints. I think the biggest ones are probably time.
Yeah, it's a big game.
I think the quickest we've ever played it at 2 players is in the 2.5 hour time range. And that's after we've gotten to know the game and the setup is done and ready. You know what I mean? Any other negatives that really come to mind?
I don't think so. I think the only thing I can think of is that the actual launching of the cruise is very procedural, and you saw that in the overview. But everything's written out, so you just have to go through those procedures. And I think remembering if you have someone on a cruise to do all that bonus stuff at the beginning, I think that can be forgotten. So there's a little bit of those, heavier things that you do have to be a little procedural, especially at the beginning of your turns and as you're launching off your ships. But other than that, it's just a fabulous game.
Yep.
Okay, what are you coming in score-wise?
How about you go first?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So final thoughts for this for me is this is a glorious and beautiful game. It is one that I was excited about because I thought the theme was going to be cool and, it was interesting. But after playing it, it really just grasped me. The fact that my first game was at 3-player count, it was like a 4.5-hour game. And by the end of it, it didn't feel like 4.5 hours. It felt like I just played this fabulous, crunchy Euro game that I loved, And there just wasn't negatives. And like you said, there's not a lot to say bad about this. Like my tastes, this fits. It aligns really well, and it aligns really well to your tastes, which are not always perfectly the same. We both like heavier games. And so to be able to have that positive interaction, the way that those gears work and you just grow. And so you're building an engine, but the engine isn't massive, but it's still there. You can reuse those ships again. You can reuse the gears. There's so much good stuff. So the theme tie-in, the actual actions of the game, it's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, so I didn't give a score, did I?
You didn't give a score, yeah.
Okay, my score is 9.5. I'm so on the verge of giving this a 10, but I just don't feel like I've played it long enough, over enough time for a 10. But I could see this, next year, if I'm still coming back to this, it being a 10.
I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to give this a 10.
Good for you.
Love this game. I've played it multiple times. I have set it up, torn it down multiple times. Even going through all of that, which maybe would be the other negative, that it's just one of those big games. There's a lot going on. They've done the best they can to minimize that difficulty. I love that. Both with the trays they include in the box and all that stuff, both with the player aid and the rule books. Everything that they've done just feels like you've taken away as many obstacles as you can for a very involved game. I love this one, and I'm so excited to keep coming back to it and playing it more and more. I could play that first game setup, your starter game setup, multiple times, and I have, and I'm not bored of it. And we have mixed up the actions, and it's changed up the game drastically. I love that type of variability in the game, but I think that even without all of that, it's still so solid. I think a small note I want to say to people who are probably those really diehard Lacerda fans, you might look at this and say, maybe it feels like they've trimmed a little bit too much. Maybe it's too smooth and everything. Mm-hmm. For one thing, I think that mixing up the actions will help. Two, I think that there are 2 expansions for this where the blueprints as you build your cruise ships involve more lining things up and whatnot.
It makes it more complicated for sure.
You want to play on hard mode, I think that some of those expansions might be there for you. Mm-hmm. There's so much we didn't talk about. The technologies, which are so fun. The cards with the bonuses that are instant play or use them as a resource. But man, they really come in handy, and those also switch up the game so you have a different experience game to game. There's so much we didn't talk about.
So much.
And we would bore you to tears, I think, if we talked about everything we liked about this game.
I think that it is a big testament to this game, the fact that just it being in our house, almost every single night in the last week, you've been like, oh, Galactic Cruise. We could play Galactic Cruise.
Could play it tonight
again. It's like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, we got to get up early.
That's a really good sign.
Yeah, I love this one, 10 out of 10. This is an excellent game, according to both of us. But, of course, your taste might be different. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Wendy Yi.
And I'm Chris Yi.
And go on the Dice Tower Cruise because it's awesome. Also play Galactic Cruise.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video from the Dice Tower. Hey, you want to learn more about us, communicate with us? We have a Facebook group, we have a Discord channel, lots of different ways to get involved with the Dice Tower. You can find that in our Linktree link below. So just click that, it will take you and you can communicate with us on Facebook, join our Facebook groups. There's lots of cool things that you can find and become part of the Dice Tower. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Bassett.